No, 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 no.
Hey, thank you for joining the Escape With Me Book Club. Escape with me, Sam Reiner.
And me, Lizzie Sawyer.
Into our most recent read. Come with us as we evade reality and go into detail about a new book. We'll be covering the book from beginning to end, so there will be spoilers. Today we're going to Forks, Washington, United States. Published November 1st, 2016, Life and Death is a reimagining of the Twilight series if the characters were gender flipped. Beau Swan has moved to Forks and quickly becomes obsessed with the Cullens, including one Edith, right?
Yeah, it's Edith.
Edith Cullen. How does the world change with the new dynamic, and how does it end? So for some background on this, I read these books in middle school and I was a Twihard. That was before the movies came out. I watched the movie in one of my friend's bedrooms and I liked it, but I also hated it. We kind of trashed on it and it was way more fun to listen to the commentary where Robert Pattinson was just not okay with the fact that they plucked his eyebrows for the role. And so he just kept harping on that. Like, you can't trust a vampire who plucks his own eyebrow. It was the funniest thing. You could tell he hated this role. It's so funny to me now as an adult. I'm glad it helped launch his career and Kristen Stewart's career. And funnily enough, oh, what's her name? Pitch Perfect.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Anna Kendrick.
That one, yes.
Who forgot that she was in this movie.
Her autobiography is really good, by the way.
Her Twitter was really good. I haven't looked at it in forever. I don't know if she still has one given everything, but I remember when I first got Twitter in college because I am a very slow mover for social media, but I remember following her and she was so much fun. So that's my background. Read all the books, loved all of them, except for the second one I thought was bad. And of course, now as an adult, I definitely have thoughts about those books. Less thoughts than some people have. But we did Midnight Sun.
Did we do the first Twilight book too?
No, but I read the first Twilight book for this again. It's not as bad as you remember it being, haters. Honestly, it just reminded me of what she's good at, because you don't become that freaking famous without being good at something. And she's just really good at characterization of her characters, making them feel real and like an actual person that you can connect to. Bella does a really good job of being the every girl, where not everything she does is exactly like I am, but it's enough similar that I can see parts of myself in her. There's a lot of authors that don't do that very well. So yeah, but reading them back to back, that one and this one, which are basically the same book until the last two chapters, really burnt me out. There is only so much Stephanie Meyers I can read. And that was it. Reading the same book twice, basically, was it. You only read the first one, right?
Oh, I tried reading the second one, but I said reading. I listened to every book that I quote-unquote read.
The second book's bad.
But the audio files were messed up on the second one, and so I stopped there. Also, partly because I don't really like Stephanie Meyer's writing.
Yeah, which is fair. There's definitely things she could improve on, but who doesn't?
There are, and I'll get into it later when we get to a certain scene in this book, but there are certain emotions that she's trying to
convey,
raise up in the reader when you read a certain scene that she wants you to feel something, and it confuses me as to what exactly it is that she's attempting to make you feel.
Yeah.
I'm confused as to the whys for some of the stuff that she writes.
Yeah. So that's my background. I read them in middle school, which, by the way, you were blessed for not reading New Moon. As a Twihard, you are blessed to not have read that book.
Okay.
So I read the book. I owned all the books. I read it once, and then it probably took me all school year to do that. And then I never read them ever again. So it was definitely interesting picking it up as an adult, but not as bad as some other series we've done that I read in the middle school. And I'm just like, ooh, girl, you need help.
I can completely agree on that, yes.
Little Sam, you need help.
Thinking back specifically to, what was it? The Frog Princess? Was that what it was called?
Yes, the Frog Princess. That one was pretty base.
I remember that being a lot better than it was when we read it.
Yeah, that is for sure.
It was very bad.
Granted, maybe it's good for a It's not even mid-lit, it's elementary school. But I go back and read Series of Unfortunate Events, which arguably is mid-lit.
See, that's good, though.
It was so much better. We read Swindle as adults and liked it.
Yeah, Swindle was decent. Oh, but Series of Unfortunate Events, you can get audio files read by Tim Curry.
That is wonderful.
Which is a blessing.
It really is. It's a gift to the world.
It really is. I said no the way that Tim Curry says no for a really long time after listening to them.
So, age level for this, though, it is young adult.
Yeah.
We're talking teenagers. And content warning for this book, which is probably the exact same as Twilight, maybe a couple things added, but animal death mentioned, blood, kidnapping, torture, murder, graphic violence, death of a child is mentioned, death of a parent is mentioned, and illicit drugs are mentioned a lot.
A lot.
Edward really likes talking about heroin.
He just doesn't talk about it quite as much, but yeah.
I want to say they talked about it more in this book than Twilight, but it's going to blur together a little bit in my brain. There are definitely things that stick out where it's like, oh, this is different, and that's different, and stuff, but that one, a little murky. But yeah, both books definitely have the line, I'm your type of heroine.
See, but this one also has the bit at the end where Bo's like, I get what she means when she said heroin.
True, but we're not going to say why that is yet, because that shocked me. But judge a book by its cover. It's a male's hand holding an apple instead of a female holding an apple. But why is it green? Was my only thought for this. Like, oh yeah, dude, but...
Because green apples are the opposite of red apples, ? If Midnight Sun was a pomegranate, what do you think the gender-bent version of Midnight Sun book would be holding if she's decided that green apple is the opposite of red apple?
Oh, if we're using that logic?
Yes.
Because I was going to say like a dragon fruit, because it's the same but different.
I could see dragon fruit.
But if we're going to use the green apple logic, which I do not understand, what colors do pomegranates come in? We're about to learn.
I think they only come, like if we were talking watermelon, watermelons come in red and yellow.
Ranging from yellow to purple.
Oh, wow.
With a mix of pink and red, most common.
I didn't know that.
Seed colors ranging from white to red.
Oh, wow.
So I would say a yellow pomegranate with white seeds.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But I feel like the cover of Twilight kind of hints toward, obviously, the Garden of Eden. But the way she's holding it could be a little bit lewd, but I think it's leaning more to offering your heart to someone. But this one, he's just straight up like, nah, here you go. Here's a green apple.
Have an apple. This one's green.
I also love it. The girl is holding it, and it's just like, oh, I'm offering it to you. And the guy's just like one-handed, like, nah, here you go. I'm just so curious about the person who designed it. So it was like, we need to express that this is a male book. One hand. I tease. There's not really much to get from the cover. It's very obviously, oh, it's gender-bent Twilight. I don't know who it was, though. I had to tell someone they'd seen the book and they thought it was a spoof. You know, there's 1,000 different types of spoofs on the Twilight series because it was so popular. And I had to tell someone that Life and Death was written by Stephanie Meyers. It wasn't just a random one. She did it. Girlie's back for one book. And I'm kind of glad about it. I don't think I could have done a gender-bent New Moon. I don't think I could relive New Moon. I just hate it so much as a concept. It's probably not as bad as I remember, but it's just sulky Bella for a book and Jacob being kind of cool, but forcing this love triangle, but it's really obvious that Bella's not into him, so it's just kind of rude. And then Edward just shows up at the end. What was the point of this book? Goodbye. But to get into it, I don't know if the audiobook had it, because all my audiobooks never have it. They don't usually say the dedication or anything like that. So there was a note from the author in the beginning of this book, right?
Oh, no, it had that.
Oh, it had it? Good. Because I love it. It's so funny to me. In a that's really personable and kind of cute way. She talks about how there's going to be differences in the book because they were Twilight fans obsessively reading Midnight Sun and Twilight back to back with each other. And so she's like, my fans are going to want to know this. So she talks about how there are changes into the book. And, you know, like 5% is because it's a male perspective. 5% is because this, that, and the other thing. 5%, 5%, 5%. And then she goes, and 70% of the changes are because they have annoyed me for the past 10 years. And I just love that for her. I feel like authors should get a chance to fix the things that bother them about their books. So she's like, I got to do that, and I'm so happy for her as a person.
Mm-hmm.
As a person, she seems very nice. So I'm happy for her that she got to change it. But apparently she had a lot of issues with her own book, which is fair. We're going to just go with that. It was cute. And so I liked that. That was a good start. Where I was like, okay, Stephanie, I'm happy for you. So I don't think I realized her dedication to the gender flip. When I looked at this book, though, I thought Edward and Bella were going to be switched, right? No, every single character except for the parents are gender flipped. The teachers, the students, the rest of the Cullens, the people that are just background characters, Jacob and all their crew is gender flipped. Everything is gender flipped. I did not realize the dedication she had for this mission. It's kind of a lot. I had to write down so many names. And then sometimes I wrote down what their other name is because goodness.
Mm-hmm.
I want to complain about some of their name choices, though. I like Bo. Bo is fine. Bo Ford, I like that he makes a joke that he is his grandfather's name, and it's the gosh darn it, he had to die 2 months before I was born, so I got that name. And that was very personal. That was cute. I hate all the Cullens' names.
I thought Archie was okay.
Okay, I could get behind Archie.
Edith is fine.
I could get behind Eleanor, even though Eleanor is spelled Elaeanor. And I know why she did it. They are obviously named in the time period they grew up. So Edith, which is really cute. You didn't see this because you had an audiobook, but it was really cute. He spelled Edith like you would think to spell Edith, Edith, until later on he sees it on her paper or something. And he's like, oh, I've been spelling it wrong in my mind. It's Edith, Edythe. And then for the rest of the book, he actually spells it correctly. That was kind of cute. I liked that. I'm just saying, people out here hating on Lynn names and other white names, white people have been doing it for generations. Some of the spellings of these names. Jasmina is Jessamine.
Yeah, Jessamine.
Jessamine instead of Jasper. Jasper's such a cool name. I like Jasper. Elliot is pretty standard. Just her gender flipping and really changed how culturally acceptable I feel like some of them. Rosaline got changed to Royal?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either. Carlisle got changed to Corrine, which is actually a more normal sounding name to be. And then Esme got changed to Ernest.
Which is fine.
Which is fine. I made a big deal, but I don't know. I like the original names better, except for Archie. I stand by Archie.
Archie's a good one.
But then I went on this whole mental note. Do we change girl names that often? Like spellings and stuff? Guys always get like Timothy, Brandon, you know, like things we've had for forever. And so then I went on this whole mental thing. Do female names get changed more often than boy names? It's a whole thing. Anyway, beside the point. Oh, Phil, the mom's boyfriend, also doesn't get gender flipped. I'm sorry. I was wrong.
Well, unless she decided to make Beau's mom a lesbian.
That would add such a dynamic.
Right?
I think that would take over a little bit of the story.
The real reason that they got a divorce.
So those three. But yeah, it's Twilight.
I mean, it is.
I will say, reading back through just a couple things that applies to both, there is a line in the beginning of Twilight that I never noticed because I only read the book once, and I didn't know it was about vampires when I read it, because my friend was like, you need to read this book, and I said, what's it about? And they said, I'm not telling you. You need to read this book. And I was like, okay. So I got to experience the shock of it. But there's a line, it's about Bella/Beau going to school and being nervous, and it's like, oh, I don't need to be nervous. Specifically says, it's not like anyone was going to bite me. Okay, clever, fair. That was, okay, yeah.
I mean, technically no one from the school bites them.
That is true. Yeah, in both books. Gosh, into the episode, general thoughts. But no, yeah, it's really, really similar to Twilight. She had a manuscript on the left side of her screen, and then she was typing on the right side, going line by line, basically.
I feel that pain. I've done that. It's tedious.
So the only things that really change in the beginning is things like in Twilight, what do women find super attractive in men? And that's how Bella is looking at Edward. And so we get to see that flipped. And it's like, oh, what do men want from women? Whereas Beau is looking at Edith. Although I want to point out, freckles are beautiful. Shut up, Beau. What the heck? It's like, oh, her skin was flawless. It was beautiful. It had no markings or scars or freckles or whatever. And I was just like, rude. Freckles are beautiful, jerk. It's probably the only thing I'm going to feel very strongly about. So they meet each other. Edith runs away. She's acting weird. Things settle down. She starts talking to him again. They kind of ignore each other, but talk to each other. It's Twilight.
Okay, but the difference between this book and Twilight is that I enjoyed this book up until the meadow scene, because it didn't feel as gaslighty and creepy as it does with Edward when it's Edith. Probably because
Dynamics.
Girl versus dude.
Yeah, social dynamics.
Just that general power dynamic.
Yeah, Beau has a really, really hard time coming to the realization that she's basically a superhuman. My man. Bella has a much easier time believing that. Every time he sees her do something, like when she runs, he's in disbelief. She mentions hunting. He's like, I can't imagine this beautiful creature possibly getting in danger. And it's like, dude, she lifted a truck off the ground.
Yeah, but she's also tiny.
But she's hot.
I mean, she's also hot, but she's tiny.
Oh, she's just the beautifulest, she couldn't possibly, like, my man. Also, it's 2007 technology. Now, reading it in 2024, we're getting close to the nostalgia level. It's about 20 years. 20 to 30 years is when things get super nostalgic. So we're about to hit it, but I'm curious how people felt about it. But it was pretty funny to me reading about someone going to the internet, and the only site that they could possibly use in the entirety of the internet. When was Wikipedia invented?
I have no idea.
No, we're looking this up. It was launched in 2001. And I remember in middle and high school being told, well, don't go to Wikipedia for your facts. Still get kind of told that.
Yeah, but Wikipedia cites their sources.
Heaven forbid. Which is, honestly, that's what I got to college, and my professors were like, no, go to the Wikipedia page, scroll down, look at the sources, there you go.
Ta-da!
Just go to the sources. You're great.
Just go to the sources.
It's the best place to collect sources about your material. But going back, it's like the only place he could possibly find any information about vampires is just this one random website where they have categorized every vampire myth ever.
Do you remember when websites like that used to be more abundant? Just the random generic thrown together, tossed up on the internet, solid color, black text.
The tabs looked weird and wonky. Yes.
Yes. The links don't quite work.
So that's what this website does sound like, but I was looking a little bit. This is the only website obsessed with vampires?
No, he mentions going to other websites, but it all being the same basic.
Yeah.
Allergic to garlic, stake through the heart, sleeps in a coffin, can't cross over running water.
Honestly, I joke about the vampires a little bit, but for my age, it's hard to remember a time before the supernatural romance obsession that this book launched, because in middle school, I read a lot of vampire books.
There were a lot of vampire books when we were in middle school, though.
There were a lot of vampires books I didn't read. There are so many vampire books.
There was the Cirque du Freak books, which I don't think you've read, but there were also the 8th Grade Bites, that series. You remember? And that one book series, it was the big, thick book.
I read the graphic novel of the first Cirque du Freak. That happened somehow. You had those. Blue Bloods, Night World had a vampire story in it. That is a kind of a short story, but not short story collection. It's weird.
They were good, though.
There's 3 stories in each book. Moving on. That series, obviously Twilight.
There's a lot.
There were a lot. But yeah, it's just the cultural revolution that was this book that has caused supernatural romance to just become its own section in the used bookstores. So I'm sitting here like, oh my gosh, the only thing dedicated to vampires? But honestly, the world before Twilight was not so nearly vampire obsessed. My husband could go into a great monologue. He is obsessed with all the old Dracula movies. So he could talk about how Dracula, Esperado, and all those other ones changed over time and then eventually get to Twilight. Because vampires were always about sex. Vampires were basically syphilis, but as a monster. But that's changed because it went from, they're terrible, bad, you don't want that, to now this is literally all of them was about dating vampires.
Did you mean syphilis?
Syphilis, yeah.
Okay, I heard cephalus.
I probably said it wrong.
It took me a second, sorry.
But yeah, I gotta be honest, the one thing that did stick out to me just a little bit, Bo didn't come off horny enough sometimes, but it's a YA, so you don't really want to get into all that. Although they talk about sex in the book, which they do not talk about in the first Twilight book. They talk about it in the third one.
They do, but it doesn't feel horny when they do it.
He's literally curious if it's possible.
Yes, but it doesn't feel horny.
It's not. It's for science.
Yeah, he is a teenage boy, and he does mention that he is currently hard because she's on top of him. But it doesn't feel like a, did you want to bang?
Yeah.
You know, it's just kind of like a, so if it were possible.
What would that be like? And she's like, I would kill you. He says, oh.
And he's like, yeah, all right, I believe that.
Fair enough.
This hot chick killing me? Absolutely.
But that was one of the differences I noticed. They were much more upfront about sex than they were in the other one. Probably because she had to condense to one book. A couple of interesting things. One of the things I was really interested in was when he goes out and reads on the blanket. In Twilight, she reads Jane Austen, and she's upset that one of the guys is named Edward and the other guy is named something close to Edward. And I was really curious if she was going to keep that, if he was a guy just interested in Jane Austen. No, he reads Thousand Leagues Under the Sea.
Which is also a good book.
Which makes sense, but I was a little bummed that he also didn't have a book where he was reading the book, and then there was a girl named Edith, and he was like, gosh, dang it.
I've tried reading Thousand Leagues Under the Sea. The story idea is really good, but the book itself was kind of boring just because the conversations aren't overly interesting, and it drags just a little.
So that was a big change. Another big change was the reason Bo, Jeremy, and Alan, sure, that's fine names, head to Port Angela is not to dress shop, it's to order corsages?
Well, that, and they're going to go see a movie.
And they're going to go see a movie, which I thought was a little weird. Do guys not go to dinner? Do they not get hungry?
Two guys sit in a hot tub 10 feet apart because they're not gay. No.
That was just the thing that popped into my mind. And maybe it needed to be more substantial than just going to dinner. But honestly, if you're in small enough town, going out to dinner in bigger town is really nice.
I mean, maybe they didn't want to spend that much money. They're already spending a bunch of money on the corsages.
Yeah, I don't know. They went and saw a movie. That was changed.
They don't seem like the sort of guys that would go down to like a sit-down place. They seem like the sort of guys that would be like, and then we went to McDonald's in the movie. Yeah.
On the way home. It was just something that popped into my mind. I was like, do men not go to dinner together?
I'm sure some men do. Just not these.
Not just these guys.
Just not these guys.
I don't even remember what movie they were going to see. It was some sort of action thing.
I don't remember if it ever actually had a name.
Probably not.
Because I feel like Bo was just like, yeah, it's the new movie. The new movie. The new action movie. Do you want to go see the new action movie?
With that scene, though, one of the major changes, because I was really curious how she was going to do this scene. In Twilight, she gets lost like an idiot. Girl, but rereading Twilight as an adult, I agree with Edward so much. What is her damage? Why does the universe hate her so freaking much?
No, the universe doesn't hate her. The author hates her.
My gosh. She's like, you are the only person that goes to Port Angeles and almost gets murdered. You would have spiked their crime rate for the next decade. Anyway, in Twilight, she's by herself. She runs into this group of sketchy guys, and sketchy guys do sketchy things around female. And so I was wondering how they were going to do it in this book, because that's not a common situation that men find themselves in. But I kind of got a vibe when he got off the plane. He gets off the plane, he has a thing over his shoulder, and he walks into someone. And it's a woman and the man's all, meh, 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 I'm a thug, meh. And the woman is also sketchy. And they stop because next to him, Charlie is a cop, and they calm down and then they leave. And I was like, Bo's going to run into those in Port Angeles, isn't he? This is going to be important. And guess what? He runs into them again at Port Angeli. He basically walks into an alley and sees a drug deal go down. And then the woman that was with the dude thinks he's a cop, like he's Charlie's partner instead of his kid, which makes me wonder how old Bo looks. Because there are some teenagers that look older, and then there are some teenagers that are baby face, even up to 17 and 18. So it makes me wonder a little bit what Bo kind of looks like, because I imagine him kind of baby face, because I think of Bella kind of baby face too, but runs into them, drug deal. They're just like, let's murder him. Because why not? Because he convinces them, hey, I'm his son, not whatever. And they're just like, okay, we're going to shoot you anyway. Because one dude is hot-headed. And so Edith saves him, like in Twilight. But unlike Twilight, I noticed, Edward keeps his cool, quote unquote. He doesn't outwardly express his anger. And he's just like, I need to stay with Bella or I'm going to go hunt those guys down and kill them. In this version of the book, she just drives them out of the city. They're in the middle of nowhere. She stops and she's like, I'm going to be right back. And he's like, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm going to go murder them. And Bo has to be the one that talks her out of murdering them.
Makes more sense to me.
No, it makes more sense with the characters, but I was just a little bit interested about that. I was like, Stephanie Meyers feels like she can give Edith more of a temper than she could have given to Edward, because Edward already has, like you said, like that kind of creepy power dynamic guy vibes. And so she had to be really careful with that. But with Edith, she's like, nah, Edith, run over there, murder people. But Bo obviously convinces her to not, and Edith takes him to dinner anyway. I was seriously wondering if they were going to go to the movies. But no, they go to dinner, and that starts to pick up right where we left off. I do love, though, that rereading Twilight, that she's totally fine with being like, you're like Spider-Man, right? Radioactive spider? No? Okay, fine. She's a little embarrassed about it, but she's like totally fine. But when it's vampire, she's like, no, I can't say it. I can't even think the word. Like, it's pretty far in before anyone actually says the word vampire. Besides Jules. Julie briefly is like, oh, vampires, myth. But it's pretty deep into the book before Edith is like, we're vampires. And he's like, okay, I've been avoiding that word, but yes. So in Twilight, there's this whole debacle about Bella. The 3 guys like her. They all ask her out to homecoming. Well, there's this one guy, Tyler, who's like, I'm taking you to prom, but never asks her. And then later shows up at her house during prom with a corsage all dressed up.
It's like, at what point did I say yes?
You deserve this. But in this version, Edith makes Bo feel bad because she's like, oh yeah, Taylor thinks you're taking her to prom. And he's like, what? And she's like, she's already bought her prom dress. And he's like, what?
He's like, at what point did I ask her to prom?
You're like, oh yeah, she's just going to ask you. So it would have been, I feel, more mean-spirited because prom dresses are so freaking expensive. And it's this whole culture.
Well, she bought it before she thought he was taking her.
I feel like it would have been too mean-spirited to have her show up to the house expecting a date and then not getting one. So instead, we get probably one of my favorite scenes in the book. Bo at lunch breaks up with Taylor, being like, I see how you look at Logan. I know you're interested in him and not in me. And it's just this whole thing. I couldn't stop laughing the entire time. It was so cringy what he was saying and doing, but somehow it totally works. And Taylor and Logan immediately become a couple, and Logan takes her to prom.
See, that's why I like the book up until the meadow scene. They're actually characters in this book. Versus in Twilight, where it's just the hamster that is Bella and he's not even a cat because he doesn't have that much personality. The dark shadow with teeth that is Edward.
The Cheshire Cat grin, no body.
Not even that. He's just dark shadow with teeth. Don't come near me, I'm too dangerous. You'd be like heroin to me.
You'd be like alcohol to an alcoholic. Well, that's not strong enough. Heroin.
Heroin.
Okay, guys. I'm pretty sure you've never had heroin in your life, but okay.
But Edith has a nice sense of humor, and they have a back and forth, and they feel like people.
They really do have a cute back and forth. And there's a couple times where she'll add things where they just say 1 or 2 lines to each other.
Yes!
And I'm just like, is this what bothered you? Were you like, they needed more chemistry?
They needed more chemistry!
This is what is being fixed.
And they have it in the first half of the book.
No, there are several times where she'll just add lines between the two of them, and they're very cute. They have a lot of chemistry together.
And it's good. Except the meadow scene pisses me off as much as it did in Twilight. And even more here because Edith's personality goes out the window and she just turns into what Edward was, which was, oh, but you can't love me because I'm awful and I'm dangerous and I'm awful and I'm dangerous and I'm awful. And I'm awful.
The meadow scene.
I very much dislike the meadow scene.
Well, I mean, there's not much left. She goes to the beach, she meets the blacks. Jules is like, hey, they're vampires.
But PT Dubs.
Anyway, and then that Saturday there's the meadow.
Which happens really fast.
The meadow scene in the original, I was obviously fine with it. But even I was like, the meadow scene was weird. And reading it as an adult, it's weird.
It's weird.
Because it's this big moment where Edward's like, I'm going to show you my true powers. And he kind of throws a temper tantrum randomly. But then it is immediately like, oh, but don't be scared of me. It builds, but it doesn't build far enough for the temper tantrum. There's not even 3 things. He's just like, oh, I am really strong and I am really fast. At least do 3 things. Come on, Shakespeare is not wrong. That bothered me a little bit.
Did it also bother you how, I think in both, the vampire is able to be close to the human up until the edge of the sunlight, and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, the sunlight makes it that I can't control myself anymore, and now it is too difficult, and I have to stay far, far away from you.
So in Twilight, and I want to say in Life and Death, one of the kisses makes sense. They kiss with mouth closed, and then he can't do it anymore when she opens her mouth, and then, her probably minty fresh breath comes in and it overwhelms him, whatever. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But there are other times where it's just like, oh, you moved too quickly, okay? Or your kiss got too intense. And I'm just like, you're able to be that close? If you're so close to the edge, why are we doing... Yeah,
and then shortly after, because the book goes so quickly after this, right?
Yes, it is.
It's so quickly after.
And we remembered this in Midnight Sun. The beginning of the book can be a drag. I think it's good.
So, but the beginning of this book was good.
Okay, in Twilight, I thought it was a little tedious. I think it's good in Life and Death. They have way more chemistry. It's much better.
Life and Death, it's much better.
But the pacing really goes from a chapter is one class period to running. We are gone. We are going. We're going to Phoenix. There's a murder after me. Mom's been kidnapped. I'm going to go get almost murdered by a vampire. But also weirdly not, because there's like 3 chapters where he is just sitting in the hotel room. It's a weird pacing shift, for sure. It came out of nowhere in a lot of ways.
Stephanie put so much emphasis on Edith having a hard time being near Beau, and how each time she leaves him and comes back, it's like she has to start over and it's very difficult, but it's not as hard each time. She puts a lot of emphasis on this, right? And then when we get to the baseball scene, even like shortly before that, it all goes out the window. We forget all about that. It doesn't matter anymore. It's whatever. It never comes up again.
No, we have new plot.
It doesn't add to the complications with the hunting at all. It's fine. It's whatever. Edith can touch him now. It's chill. They can kiss. It's fine. It's okay.
Well, to be fair, in this book, not in Twilight, they don't get a chance to kiss again until the ending. To give her a little grace on that one.
No. They share a kiss on the couch before the baseball game.
They do. No, that for sure. Baseball game on, though. Yeah. Although, there was one scene, because I was wondering how it was going to work. In Twilight, he basically gives Bella a piggyback ride to run, right?
Oh, I love the piggyback scene in this book. I think it's great.
Beau is canonically much taller than her.
Because I was like, how is this going to work? And he's like, how is this going to work?
And she doesn't hold on to him like a baby or whatever. It's a piggyback ride still. And the line is, I must look like a gorilla on a greyhound.
Oh, it's so funny. It's so good.
You ain't wrong. Here, you're not wrong at all. And once again, he has a really hard time. He's like, you can't carry me. And she's like, bruh.
He's like, I can carry you.
So even if you were like, oh yeah, you can totally carry me, I would also feel awkward.
Where are my limbs gonna go?
He's like, where do I put my feet? And she's holding his legs because his legs legs are so long.
It's fine. He's like, it's so not fine, though.
This is not okay. And it even adds to it, I feel like, because he gets motion sickness from running that fast fair. And Bella got the same thing, and it was like, okay, you know, whatever. But I feel like it adds, because it's like she was securely attached to Edward, although motion sickness is about your ears being like, we're moving, and if you don't see physically that you're moving, then that's where the sickness comes in. That's why looking out the front window or being in the front seat helps motion sickness. So I feel like it would be worse, because he's like, doesn't feel secure to this tiny little creature. He's like, I'm going to die.
He's like, she's gonna kill me, and not the way she thinks she is.
At least when Bella did it, like, their heads would probably be about the same height, so if he was running, he wouldn't have to worry, but I'm imagining him like a whole head taller still. Oh, goodness. There are some very funny, great things. One of the things that the gender swap I was really curious about was how the vampire origin stories changed. And we get all of them in this book because there is only one. You get them over time in 4 books in the Twilight series. I'm pretty sure Jasper specifically is in Eclipse. So we get to talk about how all those changed. So let's just start with Corrine.
It felt very info dumpy.
In Twilight, Carlisle was the son of a preacher. The preacher was looking for vampires and witches as they did. And Carlisle was like, we should use logic and actually track down real monsters and not just random citizens. So he does. And he finds a vampire coven, and through this, he gets attacked, crawls into a bunch of potato peels, and becomes a vampire. Well, that story doesn't work if it's a woman during that time period. So instead, the father found the real coven. They even phrase it like, he somehow managed to actually find a real one. Father finds the coven. One of the vampires breaks out and it is like, how dare you? I'm going to change your daughter and she will become everything you hate. And that's her origin story instead, which is somehow sadder. Not somehow, it is sadder than the other one. She didn't do anything. She was just born to this dude. Gosh. Esme throws herself off a cliff after her child dies. Ernest throws himself off a cliff when his wife jumps off a cliff with their child. That is also sadder. Why are they all sadder? Archie is the same. Possibly had premonitions of the future in the 1920s. Thus, she was sent to a mental institution where she received shock therapy. Thus, she doesn't remember much of her human years, even when she was first transformed. The hunter in both books, they're gender bent, but the hunter was like, your blood's really good. And so a vampire saved Alice/Archie by turning them into the vampire. The hunter killed the vampire that created Alice/Archie. I don't know why it then left them alive. I had questions about that this time around. Why kill the vampire and not the new fledgling as well? It's a little weird, but convenient for survival. Still one of my favorite characters, for sure. Although, so Alice has a pixie cut. Archie just has buzzed hair. Okay. I don't know how you felt about that. Some of the physical changes between them.
It's alright. It's not how I pictured him in my head throughout the entire book, so I don't know if I really have an opinion on the buzzed hair.
Jasmine is kind of safe. Honey hair, shoulder length. Corrine looks like Carlisle, longer hair. Ernest looks like Esme with shorter hair. Eleanor has dark curly hair still, but really long and in a ponytail, which is fine because, like gym girl. Kind of like that. The thing that they really focused on with Edith was that she has pink, full lips. And he mentions it several times, and I guess that's a thing, but that was a difference between the books, because I think she mentions his lips once in Twilight, so that's different. But going back to backstories, Royal. Do you remember Royal's backstory? Because I remember Rosalie's, which she was attacked by some men, sexual assault and rape implied, and then murdered. And so she was barely alive at that point and saved her life. And then Rosalie went back and murdered the men that killed her. And so that's why she's so freaking bitter about becoming a vampire, is because she feels like her entire life was great and good. I think she was even engaged and everything was right until those men attacked. And then she had not only her life taken from her, but her humanity taken from her. And that's why she doesn't like Bella, because Bella's like, but I want to be a vampire. And she's just like, no. But I don't remember Royal's story off the top of my head.
No, I Googled it. Corrine found him after he was almost beaten to death by his fiance's secret lover.
There we go. That one's less sad. Not great, but less sad. And then Elliot/Eleanor gets to keep the same backstory.
Hey, attacked by a bear. It's a classic.
They were fighting a bear. And Royal/Rosalie, depending on the version, finds him, scoops him up, takes him to Carlisle/Kareen, begs him to turn him into a vampire, and then, love forever. Love. By the way, Royal is 6'5". He's the only person, I think, in this entire book that gets a height, and it is 6'5". I love that that's the only person in the book that gets a height is Royal. Because Bo's sizing him up. He's like, oh, he is taller than me.
Oh boy, that boy is tall.
I feel like there's less jealousy there between Bo and Royal versus Bella and Rosalie. He's basically a model, but I feel like there was more petty jealousy between Bella and Rosalie a little bit.
It's because girls have to be jealous of one another.
They have to be catty. Although Rosalie's reason is kind of deep, and I'm a little sad that her character kind of gets stuck as the I hate Bella character, and so that kind of drags her down when she could have been more complicated. So yeah, the meadow scene happens, then immediately, let's talk about baseball. So we need to meet the Cullens, and then she's like, oh, well, I need to meet your family. Then they go to the baseball field. Once they're at the baseball field, 3 vampires show up. One of the vampires is a hunter and is like, I pick you. Challenge.
Yeah, Pokemon, I choose you.
A little bit. And so we get the scene with Phoenix, and I was wondering how that was going to go because Bella pulls her mom to get away from Charlie to get him to stop being like, oh, don't go, blah, blah, blah. And Bo kind of does it too, but he adds a line in it at the end because Bella just says the line is gone, and Bo says a little bit extra with the line. But yeah, they go to the Cullens' house, then everyone splits up. There was new lore, though. New vampire lore in this book, right? I wonder if you caught it. Vampire hair stops growing after you turn into a vampire. So whatever length it was when you were alive, so that's why Archie's has a buzzed head, is because he was in an insane asylum and they buzzed his head. And then he got turned into a vampire and hair doesn't grow anymore.
Which, I mean, makes sense. Their bodies are dead, technically.
It makes sense. Midnight Sun introduced that they mentally stop developing at whatever age they're at. But this was new. So we have the tracker calls them, is like, hey, I have your mom, whatever. Small change. Bella was the one that took dance lessons in Twilight. In this one, Bo remembers his mom teaching classes at this random place for like a semester before she got flighty and did something else. Yeah, that's right. The only thing I'm strongly going to say, I'll say probably for everything else, but I will strongly say is she's extremely emotionally immature.
Oh, yes, 100%.
And parentifies her child, which would, I kind of wish they played up the dynamic more, because in Midnight Sun, we get Edward's perspective of the mother. We get her internal thoughts to confirm the fact that she has thoroughly parentified her child.
Edward and Bella's relationship definitely feels very well, and Bo and Edith's also. They both feel really codependent.
Extremely.
Very, very codependent.
It happens way too fast. I don't remember when he moves in, but it feels like later. Or maybe it's just the start of the semester and whatever, but it feels like it's in the middle of the year, and then it's just very fast.
It's so fast.
And very intense. It feels very codependent. And that's the problem with New Moon, is they are highly codependent, and so them not being together is frustrating, because they're still codependent. It's just like watching your friends and being like, what are you doing with your life? Ugh. But same thing happens, gets in the room, gets beat up, and then the Cullens find him. So this is when the book stops being Twilight. The major change that has changed this timeline, along with them being the different genders, in Twilight, Edward manages to suck back the poison without draining her of her blood.
Because he's a man!
And so she can continue to be a human for 3 more books until she gets pregnant and then has child and then gets turned into vampire. But that can't happen in this book or this series. Edith cannot get pregnant. So I was really curious what they were going to do here, because there's only one book. It came out in 2016. I know nothing about this book going into it. I just know there wasn't another one, and I feel like people would have totally be down for her doing the whole series again because obsessed. But obviously they can't pull the same trick. She can't get pregnant. So I was wondering how it was going to happen. Edith doesn't remove the poison.
No, Archie pulls her off of Bo because he sees that there's only 2 futures possible. One where Edith kills Bo by trying to remove the poison, and one where Bo becomes a vampire. So Archie's like, yo, Edith, you can't do it. Because she wants to try.
You have to choose right now.
She asks him, and he's like, I just want to be with you. Because she hates herself for it the entire time.
Yeah, there's 2 chapters, so the entire time. 1 chapter, basically. But she's not happy about it. So she's of the same mindset that Royal is, that becoming a vampire is a burden. Your humanity is getting ripped away from you. It's better to just be human. And to add to the codependence a little bit, I'm sure there are plenty of people that are like, I would rather be a vampire. But literally giving up your entire life, including the people, because there's a freaking funeral for this guy. Living up your entire life for this one person is concerning in a lot of cases, because it does not end well.
You could make the argument that he's not really in his right mind, because when they ask him if he wants to be a vampire or to die, he's in an alarming amount of pain.
Yes.
And the pain does get worse, and so he does change his mind.
He's just like, I want to die. And they're like, well,
I want it to stop. And Archie's like, no, get through it. You'll be fine. It'll be okay. It's fine. It's fine. It's okay.
yeah. But it was interesting. So obviously the transition is painful. So the only thing that kind of helps is being distracted. Not really, but if you've been in a lot of pain before, you understand, like if you've had a migraine or something where it's like, I can't sit alone in a dark room because the dark room's too loud. So I'd rather listen to something soft to distract me and be in pain than listen to the echo of the world. Being distracted doesn't take away from the pain, but it gives you something. So here's the interesting part, because I don't feel like this happens in Twilight, period. Edith tells him all the information he needs to know to become a vampire, like to be a vampire and to function as a vampire.
It feels very info dumpy.
It is very info dumping.
There's a lot of info dumping in this book. It's not all interesting.
Yeah, it is very info dumpy, but some of it was new.
I agree. Some of it was new.
And honestly, the thing I actually really like about Twilight, not so much the romance. She was just the first author that I ever read that took something like a conventional thing that always was and changed it. And so that was really important to my developing mind and my little author mind to be like, oh, you don't have to do the thing literally everyone else has been doing for forever. You can do your own thing. And so I actually really enjoy people's versions of things now. I think it's very interesting. So I was interested in her lore dumps. If you're not interested, that's basically the whole chapter. Just skip to the epilogue. It's fine. He makes it.
Lore dumps can be interesting. I found some of the lore dumps a little jarring because we went from very fast plot storyline.
Barely any information. Don't even say the word vampire. And then just super thrown into the world of vampires.
Very heavy.
And then she's just like, here are all the words.
And the information by itself is interesting, but in the story it feels really out of place. It's just like, yes, let's have all of the information. Here we go. You're not supposed to know about vampires, but here, have all of the information about vampires, all of it right now. Haha. What?
It was a little funny at one point. Oh yeah, and there's these people that rule us. They're called this, that, and the other thing. And I was like, oh, that's so funny. Because she doesn't find out about them until Eclipse. So they just have to get snuck in here, which is better than another book series I read where she grew up as a witch and they were like, oh yeah, let's just not tell you that there's people that control what witches do. At least she knows. There's a hunting thing with him, except he's not affected by thirst?
Question mark? Yeah.
I have so many questions because everyone has kind of a superpower.
And it's really funny that we don't have answers because of all the info dumping.
True. Everyone has a superpower. She's able to control her mind so people can't read her mind. Cough, cough, Edward. And she figures out how to use it and move it. And so she's able to remove it from her mind at one point, and Edward can read her mind. And that's her power. It's a whole thing. I'd have to reread the later books, honestly, at this point. But he seems to just be chill. Is his power? I feel like when he's introducing all the powers that everyone have, oh, Emmett's extra strong. Archie can see into the future. Jasper can feel people's emotions and change them. And then you get to Royal or Rosalie and you're just like, oh, they're stubborn. I feel like they're going to get to Beau and be like, oh, he's just really chill.
He's just real chill, man.
Being a vampire, no big deal. Super calm. Almost flippant. Oh, goodness. That never gets explained. Because epilogue, they have a graveside service for Beau. It's actually very sad. So instead of going to can't go to the hospital, being turned into a vampire. So instead of faking an accident that got her in the hospital, they fake his death. in a flaming car explosion. And it's just really sad. Both of his parents go to the gravesite and they're like crying and stuff. And all his friends are crying. But we can't focus on that too long because there's a werewolf attack. It's called an epilogue, but it has a lot of plot for an epilogue.
It has a lot of plot for the epilogue.
So the Cullen's house is about to get attacked by werewolves because they have to slip in, oh yeah, werewolves exist too. We don't have a new moon to talk about this. So Bo explains, hey, they didn't turn me into a vampire. I was literally dying. And so I got to choose. They didn't break the covenant that you two have here. And so instead of just taking their word and not taking the word, they're like, you need to explain this to Bonnie then. So they go to a third party place and Bo talks to Bonnie. Apparently Archie didn't see this coming. I don't know how. I felt that coming just as a person being like, oh, they're going to be pissed. But oh well, Archie didn't see it coming, doesn't see the meeting, so we can be dramatic about it. But Bo convinces Bonnie, and it's like, hey, manages to resist the human smell, because, you know, chill. Insists that she watch out for Charlie and tell Jules, her granddaughter, that he's happy. The end! It kind of goes into general thoughts. I was so burnt out from this book, especially near the end. After the meadow scene, honestly, is when I was so freaking burned out. I was probably burned out a little bit earlier. But yeah, then we get just these 2 chapters where everything's different. And I'm like, you couldn't have sped up a couple chapters so we could have more of this? Of werewolf fights and becoming a vampire and all of this? Why? I feel like I went to a fancy restaurant where you order dessert and it's literally 1 tablespoon. Ah! Oh well. Yeah, I think I like Life and Death more. Not just because of the banter is better. The banter is way better. There's some really interesting ways she can take the character that she couldn't take with Bella. But I kind of like that it's 1 book and not 4. I like how kind of succinct it is. It's just a taste. And you're like, here you go. Here's all the goodness. Because the lore gets so bogged down. She definitely has pacing issues, I feel like, in all of her books. And especially the second book. It's so bad. I hate it. And I hated it then. I was just like, I hate this book so much. And I just kept reading because my friend was like, you have to keep reading. It feels so much better. It completely chops off all the unnecessary lore and all the problematic lore. Absolutely. Thank you, New Dawn. Obviously, there's definitely still the dynamic of the problematic codependent relationship, but you get the happy ending with it, so you're not going to drag that out for 4 books, because, like, in Eclipse, he's like, oh my gosh, we're together, but should we be? And it's just like, you're 3 books later. I'm tired. So it's just, I think I agree with all the people that were saying that they like Life and Death better than Twilight.
I like parts of Life and Death.
It has not converted you to a Twihard?
No, nothing will convert me to a Twihard.
But yeah, if I was going to choose one, I would probably read this. But honestly, and maybe it's because I'm burnt out, but I'm just like, cool, I relived that phase as an adult. I don't feel the need to go back. It was a good time going through that with my friends in middle school and stuff, and it was fun as an adult to be like, oh yeah, that book. But I don't see what it would provide for me at this point of my life. I guess I skipped to read again a little bit. Probably not. I can't imagine you rereading this.
No, I won't. It won't happen.
One question for the author, though. I want to know how she picks names. Does she have a baby book? Did she research the most popular boy/girl name for the dates that whoever died? How do we get to Royal? I'm so curious.
Why can't the segments right before the meadow scene up until where Bo becomes a vampire, why can't that segment right there be like the rest of the book?
It really is a pacing issue.
It's a pacing issue, but also the characters end up so bland right in there for whatever reason.
Yeah, it felt like in the before parts, there were definitely parts she was fixing, and it doesn't feel like that with the baseball. It feels like exactly the same, almost word for word, but different names. So all that chemistry that was building up, gone. Even Archie and Jasmina kind of get nuked.
Royal's barely in the book.
Granted, Rosalie's barely in the book, but...
Yeah, but I feel like she had more of a presence.
Yeah, and she gets 3 other books to make herself known and getting to know her and stuff. And I don't know, if you knew you were only going to do 1 book, I feel like you could have used Royal more. But I wonder how much she was scared of those fans... where she had to write an entire author's note to explain herself that she might have different wording I just wonder how much she was worried about changing too much that she wasn't able to be truly creative in reimagining this. Because the epilogue had way too much plot to be an epilogue, alas.
It was its own chapter, honestly. It wasn't even an epilogue.
It really was.
Honestly, because it's an epilogue before it started, when they were talking about the coffin, I was like, oh no, Charlie's dead. This is like years and years and years late. No.
No, it's Beau's funeral.
Which, okay, I get it.
That was so freaking sad. Because I don't know how much you know about Twilight stuff, but they rope in Charlie in New Dawn. They totally tell him. They're like, vampires, pregnancy, da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, I know. Then they come to the wedding.
It's great. And then this book, they were just like, nah.
Nah.
I was like, you could rope in Charlie. You could totally rope in Charlie. I know you could. Forget Renee. She's whatever. But you could have roped in Charlie afterwards.
She's not a good mom, but Beau still likes her.
Yeah. He went from the frying pan to the fire on that one. You could have roped in Charlie. That was one of the things I really liked about New Dawn. I like Charlie so much. I was just really sad. And it's like, oh, maybe one day you'll be good enough to be around people, but probably not. And I was just like, that's the one thing I would change. I mean, if I had ultimate control, there'd be other things I changed. But that's a huge thing for me. That was a bummer.
That's what fan fiction is for.
Rating. I would say seeing the musical out of 10. It was interesting to see how it was different from the movie/book. And there's probably things about the musical I like better, and like Pride and Prejudice, the musical.
Okay, but you didn't watch all of Pride and Prejudice, the musical.
I couldn't. I didn't make it.
It was really bad.
And that's when it was free, almost immediately after you had to pay for it. And I was just like, no. There's no earthly desire to pay for whatever this is.
No. Mm-mm.
So we've seen musicals like that, where I'm like, why did you do this? But I've seen musical like Shrek the Musical. I like Shrek the Musical more than I like the original movie. So those are the scales. It probably lands somewhere in the middle. But if I was going to pick it up again, I'd probably watch the musical instead. But that's how I rate it. Seeing the musical out of 10. Some things changed, some things didn't. Music!
Let's say if I were to rate Twilight out of 10, I'd give it a 3. And so this book in comparison is a 6. It's a hot pocket out of 10. The outside is warm and wonderful because I've let it sit for just a little bit, but the inside is really cold. The beginning is great, the middle is and then there's the end. It's a hot pocket.
I like it. It had to be a food analogy too.
Let me check my notes just to be sure.
This is the time to rant about this book.
I'm going to try to give context to some of these. I only wrote a few. You made your choice. I wish you'd owned up to it, which I think is complaining about Edith, whining about how she's dangerous and she should just leave, which same with Edward, honestly. I find it hard to believe that Edith actually finds Beau that interesting.
Really? Okay, to go on to that.
Right?
For both Twilight and Life and Death. The only reason Edith/Edward is interested in Bella is he can't read their thoughts. The only reason. Because he can read the thoughts of literally everyone else and he's like, oh yeah, they're so normal. They're such normies. They're so boring because I know what they think and so whatever. So he can't read her thoughts. Their thoughts are not that interesting.
They're not that interesting. They're also just normal people.
And so the only reason he's like, I don't understand you. It's like, yeah, you can't read their thoughts. You can't cheat.
I will say I love the bit after he becomes a vampire where she keeps interrupting him and he puts a finger on her lips and he's like, you're not going to know what I'm thinking unless you let me speak. I loved that bit.
But yeah, I think that every time I read it, he's like, oh, normal people are so boring with their motives and stuff, but you're different. And I'm like, because you can't read her mind. If you could read her mind, she would be just as boring as everyone else.
Okay, continuing on with my notes. Sigh, we're back to sad sack stuff. Man, I was having fun. I can't let you close when you're breathing, but piggyback rides are fine.
True.
The kiss scene was very underwhelming. I assume the first one. And then I'm confused as to what emotion Stephanie was trying to produce with the kiss at the end, Edith pulling away. Is this supposed to be a sense of danger, longing? It just feels flat. That's all I got.
There you go. Get it all out. But have you read this book? How would you have ended the series? Do you have any book recommendations for us? Tell us all about it in the comments below. If you like the video, hit like. And if you're enjoying yourself, hit subscribe for more. Thank you for exploring life and death with us. Join us next time when we'll be covering The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. I'm Sam Reiner.
And I'm Liz Sawyer.
And we hope to see you and a friend here next time. Escape With Me Book Club is a Lunar Skulk production. Check us out on TikTok or Instagram to keep up to date with us. Lunar_SKULK.